This video was sponsored by Skillshare. The first 1,000 people who click the link in my description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare Premium so you can explore your own creativity. Hello, ghost schools, goblins, and gravediggers. My name is TV Skyen, and I don't like the Unbound Thresh skin. I don't like it at all. I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of Thresh as a character. I think it relies on a really tedious, lowest common denominator slide towards appeal for its design sensibility, and the fact that it is essentially a miniature rework of the character, that this is going to be what Thresh canonically looks like in the world of Runeterra, it is frustrating. I don't like it. I think it's bad. Of course, that's easy to say. I don't like this thing is not a difficult sentiment to express generally, and while the idea that if you can't do it better, you can't criticize is some anti-intellectual bullshit that I don't subscribe to, what is true is that it can be quite difficult to look at something you don't like and make a constructive proposal as to how you think it could be made better. It's also a more vulnerable thing to do. Proposing something means that you become vulnerable to exactly the same kind of criticism that you yourself are levying. People might not like your proposal, they might tell you that, and they might tell you why, which isn't always fun. Still, if this channel is going to be worth the 100,000 subscribers it somehow has, I feel like I should at least give it a go. So, I reached out to Laura Galiano, a concept artist specializing in character art, to quite literally put my money where my mouth is and commission 2 versions of Unbound Thresh that I think would work better than what we got. If we're going to criticize Unbound Thresh, we need to understand why it exists in the first place, because there's a couple of interesting reasons why. Most skins exist because Riot shareholders want the company to make as much money as is physically possible, then they want the company to make even more money than that, and then some more money on top of that. Capitalism, the bedrock of League of Legends' business model, a business model that it helped pioneer, is to give the game away for free and charge a premium for cosmetics. But that is only partly why Unbound Thresh exists. He exists because of Wild Rift. Wild Rift is in many ways League of Legends light. It's a phone game, the matches are shorter and faster, it doesn't have all the same features, but besides being Riot's attempt at cracking the lucrative mobile gaming market after resisting Tencent nagging them to do so for over a decade, it's also an attempt to access a younger market than the PC version of the game. So, as was briefly explained by Ben Forbes, hi Ben, and Alan Moore, no not that one, from the Wild Rift team, when it came time to add Thresh to the game, the team ran into an issue: raiding. In the West, gamers are familiar with the ESRB, rated T for teen, and so on, but pretty much every market has their own version of this rating system, which determines all kinds of things about who a product can be marketed to, and by what means you are allowed to market and sell it. The Apple App Store, for example, does not allow adult entertainment to be sold on its services. And so, media performs self-censorship in order to achieve a desired rating and get access to desired markets. Anime fans will know the 4Kids edits to anime like Dragon Ball, Pokemon, and One Piece editing out firearms or turning beer into apple juice to make the content appropriate for children. In some non-Western markets, notably China, content like dead bodies, ghosts, skeletons, and other supernatural beings are subject to the same kinds of censorship rules. And I've had a lot of people in my comments posting like these rules are some kind of nefarious Chinese government conspiracy, and like, no, it's exactly the same kind of media censorship that we do in every Western country, they just have different cultural standards that are being enforced. The CCP commits plenty of brazen assaults on freedom of expression both domestic and abroad, but we consider it inappropriate to show ghosts and skeletons to children is like not out of the ordinary when it comes to the ways that media is regulated across the world. Let's keep things in perspective here. So, Thresh is a ghostly skeleton man, but putting a ghostly skeleton man in the game would push the rating in certain markets above where Riot wants it to be. They're trying to sell the game to a younger audience, so this is a problem. Which leads to a situation where either you don't put Thresh in the game at all, which would suck, he's a very popular champion with popular gameplay, or you make some changes. So, that's reason number 1. That is the primary reason Unbound Thresh was created, to fit with the ratings of a particular market. But there's yet one more important reason. Riot is currently doing the Ruined King season, the big Shadow Isles-focused mega event that has been kneecapped somewhat by COVID, unfortunately. They're doing their best to make it work, but it's getting a little rough around the edges. And Thresh, being one of the most popular Shadow Isles champions, is set to be a heavy feature in that whole event. And this is where I'm going to speculate that the gears in someone's head at Riot started turning because, hey, We need a new look for Thresh that works with the ratings restrictions for Wild Rift, and he's gonna be a big deal in the Ruined King event, so why not use this as an opportunity? If he's getting a new look anyway, let's make it a canon new look. Let's make it part of his story. And someone during that conversation will probably also have brought up that if Thresh got a new look for Wild Rift, but not for PC, a bunch of PC players would complain about not getting that updated content, which is like, true. And so, on paper, Unbound Thresh is actually a really good idea. It's a way to take something which is broadly negative, needing to censor your game for ratings, and turn it into a positive, delivering a new skin for players along with lore progression and tying it into the ongoing narrative event of the season. And genuinely, I think this was good thinking on Riot's part. I think this was a sound principle. This was a good idea in theory, and it was rather let down by an execution that, in my opinion, sucks. Okay, so I should stress, Unbound Thresh sucks, but that is my argument. That's my opinion. There are people who like the skin, there are people who think it's cool, there are people who think it's sexy. That's all valid. I am not here to be the art police. I'm not right just because I put my opinions on YouTube.com. If you like the Unbound Thresh skin, more power to you. I'm glad you have a skin that you enjoy. I think it sucks, and I'm going to explain why I think so. Thresh is not a very epic villain, or rather he wasn't. He was the warden of the Vaults of Helia on the Blessed Isles, having served the monastic order of those islands for most of his life, and by all accounts, he was really good at his job, but he was an asshole. He was unpleasant, he was cruel, he was petty, and eventually he was put into a job that would just basically keep him away from everyone because nobody wanted to be around him. You have probably met a person like Thresh in your life. Not inherently a supervillain or especially important in and of themselves, but every time you interact with them, it just ruins your whole day. A person whose only interest in other people is making their lives worse to delight in their misery. Unpleasant, cruel, evil. But as he was, a mere mortal stuck in a vault with no future prospects, perhaps he wasn't that dangerous, at least not on a broader level than the personal. When Viego then invades the Shadow Isles with his army and demands access to the waters of life, Thresh sees soldiers slaughtering his brother monks and delights in their suffering. They got what they deserved for sticking him in that vault and looking down on him, and Thresh happily offers his services to Viego. Why, yes, my king, I can lead you to the waters, of course. The murder of his people is to Thresh merely an opportunity for career advancement. That is the kind of monster that he is. When the ruination happens and the Black Mist corrupts the Blessed Isles, it affects people in a pretty consistent way. It takes all of their worst qualities, all of their darkest impulses, their deepest hatreds, their most negative emotions, and overwhelms the person with them. So, Callista, who dies in the shock of betrayal, is revived as a wraith obsessed with revenge. Hecarim, an ambitious soldier who delights in battle, becomes the Shadow of War, the very embodiment of brutality in warfare. And Viego, who dies selfishly obsessed with getting back his queen, revives as a wraith completely and utterly consumed with that entitlement and desire. What's special about Thresh is that he dies and doesn't change at all. Where Callista loses almost all of her personality, her kindness, her fidelity, her love for Ledros, her partner, and becomes nothing but a wraith of vengeance, Thresh emerges from the ruination exactly the same spiteful, cruel, vindictive, ambitious monster he has always been. For Thresh, the ruination is not an imprisonment in his own worst qualities, it is a liberation. As he puts it,
Flesh is a prison.
The ruination gives him the power to enact the kind of hateful misery that he has always wanted, and freedom from consequences for his cruelty. For him, the ruination is not a nightmare, it is a wonderland. And that's what makes him a good villain, a scary villain. He is in many ways a kind of realistic monster, just with the intensity turned all the way up. You have met someone Thresh-like in your life, someone who was that kind of empathy-deficient asshole who hurts people just for the fun of it. Thresh is that, but with absolutely nothing stopping him from making all of his wildest fantasies of cruelty real. That's what's scary about him. But you wouldn't get any of that from Unbound Thresh because it throws all of that out of the window in favor of making him sexy and cool. Now, Thresh's base design is a little bit Skeletor. It's a little bit Sunday morning cartoon. It's not exactly subtle with its hook tentacles on his skull and bone chains, but for 2013 League of Legends, a game that was much more cartoony than it is now, he's a good and pretty damn fitting expression of the character's underlying monstrosity. He's got a hook to catch you, a lantern to imprison your soul, and he can whip and flay you to torment you. It's simple, but it works. From a 2021 version of Thresh in the modern state of the game, I would expect slightly more subtle storytelling about his pettiness, his cruelty, and most importantly, his rejection of humanity. Remember, this is what makes Thresh special. When he loses his humanity, he doesn't change, he becomes more himself. That's what's unique about him. That's what makes him uniquely able to retain his own will and personality despite being ruined, because the monster that it turns him into is the monster that he already was and wanted to be. And this is my first massive disappointment with Unbound Thresh, because rejecting humanity is like his whole thing, and then this skin comes along and is like, hey, he's reclaiming his humanity that he doesn't care about. And how is this reclamation of humanity expressed visually? By making him hot for some reason. Between the desperately boring, handsome boy face, the plucked eyebrows, the styled hair, and the ghostly glow outlining the shapes of his pecs and abs, my overwhelming impression of the skin is that this looks like just some guy. Like, it just looks like some guy. And this whole thing about outlining his physique and making him jacked and like, yeah, like that's... Thresh doesn't care about that. He cares about making other people miserable. He's not interested in looking good. He's not interested in being seductive. Set is the kind of person who would care that he has that particular kind of muscularity. He cares about it. He has that kind of vanity. He is someone for whom it matters that his muscles are trim and that they're on display. It's part of his personality as like this underground pit fighter boss. Viego is the kind of person for whom it matters that he's hot and attractive. His entire self-perception is seeing himself as this romantic, wronged hero fighting for his love. He cares about being a handsome, beautiful, tragic prince. That's why he looks the way he does. But Thresh? Thresh doesn't care if he's sexy. He doesn't care if you think he's handsome or if he's attractive. That's not what he's about. He doesn't care about your admiration. All Thresh cares about, the only thing that matters to him, is making you suffer and delighting in that suffering. He cares about owning people's souls, tormenting them until they fall to pieces and then consuming them to add to his own power. He doesn't need you to think that he's attractive. All he is cruelty and vindictiveness. He's not seductive. So it sucks that they tried to make him sexy. Not because there's anything wrong with a character being sexy again, Viego, Set, Evelyn, but it doesn't suit him. It doesn't suit Thresh's character. Which leads us on to the second major disappointment of Unbound Thresh. He doesn't even actually look like human Thresh. See, we know what human Thresh looks like. Riot showed us in the Realms of Runeterra lore book they put out just 2 years ago. He looks like this. And I really like this design for him, because remember what we talked about. Before the Ruination, Thresh wasn't really an epic villain. He was a cruel, unpleasant, petty little bastard of a man who got shoved onto vault duty because nobody wanted to be around him. Again, that's part of what makes him a good villain. He represents a kind of evil that is present in ordinary lives, but turned up to 11 with all the limitations taken off. Human Thresh, in my opinion, thus, kind of needs to be a little bit mundane, maybe just a little boring, a little ordinary, kind of grounded. He needs to kind of have NPC energy, because if not for the Ruination turning him into the monster that he wants to be, a shitty NPC is probably all he would ever really have been. Like, he probably would have killed someone someday, and then he would have gotten caught, and then he wouldn't have been able to hurt anyone ever again, ideally. If the idea of the skin is that Thresh is reclaiming his human form, then he did a terrible job of reclaiming his human form, because Unbound Thresh looks exactly nothing like human Thresh. This is a good character design for human Thresh. It expresses his story, it works for him. Why bother putting this in your own goddamn book and sell it to us, Riot, if you're not actually going to use it, if it's not going to matter? And the answer why they didn't use it is the third big disappointment with the skin: the default to appeal. Earlier this year, Riot put out a developer blog by Riot Reeve, the lead producer of Champions, and it was very candid about Riot's thinking when it comes to their champion designs. New champions drive engagement with the game, and engagement keeps players playing the game for longer, but in order for a champion to drive engagement, they need to be broadly played by as many people as possible. So, Riot has made the decision that their design goal for their champions is that they should be as broadly appealing as possible. And what's broadly appealing? Well, the safest possible design choices. Human champions who are either cool, cute, badass, or hot, or some combination thereof. Another term for this is pandering to the lowest common denominator. Boring, non-controversial, middle-of-the-road, bland, filler, junk food design that challenges nothing, that innovates nothing, that takes no risks, and pushes no boundaries. It is testament to the skill and experience of Riot's creative staff that they have found ways to deliver good character designs, even in spite of this, in my opinion, creatively bankrupt set of shareholder-filleting, soulless corporate anti-artistic bean counter limitations. They couldn't save Thresh, though. Unbound Thresh is a new champion release in Wild Rift, and so the decision was made at Riot, apparently, to implement not only the censorship of the ratings boards, which kinda sucks already, but the censorship of Riot's corporate mandate for blandness. This is a design that fundamentally says, Thresh's lore, his story, his themes, his narrative arc, his concept, his history, his personality, the world building, and everything that makes him unique in the game. This design needs to be appealing. That's the only thing it needs to be, because appeal is all that matters. Give him a boy face and ghost abs, because those things are appealing. And never mind that his concept revolves around being perhaps the most inhuman monster on all of the Shadow Isles. Now again, these are my critical opinions. I've tried to back them up with arguments, but I'm not right just because I have a YouTube channel. You're free to like the skin if you want to. But let me propose something I think is better. Oh boy, it took us a while to get here, huh? We're going to go over two alternative designs. The first one is a design where we try to create something that better fits the idea of unbound Thresh, like Thresh at maximum power, all charged up on souls he has stolen from the harrowing. The second design is one where we say, okay, there are these censorship restrictions that we need to meet, so he has to be human, and we try to make the character somewhat appealing without defaulting to the most boring middle-of-the-road option, which is just make him attractive. So, the basic idea of Unbound Thresh is that he is betraying Viego. While the Ruined King is off running after his queen, Thresh takes advantage of the rush of souls and power flowing through Viego's new harrowing to siphon them off and empower himself. So, let's start with Unbound Thresh is Thresh turned up to 11. Thresh with maximum power. Thresh going Super Saiyan. So the basic idea here is to take Thresh's base design and just crank everything up another level. Now, like I said, his base design is kind of Skeletor. It's a little bit more cartoony than I would like, and so for a 2021 redesign of Thresh, I would want a little bit more subtlety. So, we made the decision to remove all the really blatant cartoon villain skull and bones stuff to help the design be a little bit more cleanly focused on chains and hooks and cruelty, rather than making him look like a Grim Reaper. He's not really a Grim Reaper character, he's a torturer. So this is Thresh drunk on souls, absolutely supercharged on power. He's so full, in fact, that he's almost having trouble containing it, like there's a crack down the center of his chest, like his collar is a seam that's splitting open, and he has lashed his own chains around his torso just to hold himself together, to keep the souls that he has consumed imprisoned, with his body literally bulging out around them. His lantern, too, is overflowing, spilling out flames rather than a mere glow, and similarly, the flames around his head are now a roaring furnace blasting out from his collar with force and fury. Speaking of his head, again, we're trying to de-Skeletor him a little bit, so we've given him a more human face. We say, okay, in the lore, there's this idea that Thresh looks more human the more power he gets, fine, but we're doing this to make him look like more of a monster, not less. His face here is little more than a mask hovering in the flames, mouth split open in a sadistic, jagged grin, and his eyes are like holes in the mask. We copied over the hair from the base Unbound Thresh skin because it would look weird and kind of too skull-like if he was bald, and it also keeps the old visual of his hair tentacles. As for the crown that he's got hovering above his head, well, we'll get back to that, but its design is borrowed directly from canon human Thresh. It's the decoration that he used to wear on his hood. So, this is my proposal for an Unbound Thresh. Thresh is a monster. He likes being a monster. Being a monster is a reflection of his truest self, and so with maximum power, why would he go back to merely being human? Humanity to him is a limitation, and one that he was only too happy to transcend. Moving on to our human Thresh. Here, I'm trying to respect the concept of vanilla Unbound Thresh as much as possible. I'm trying to take as much from Riot's version of this character as possible and change only what's necessary to make the character align more with what I think Thresh should be like. So to that end, he's basically wearing exactly the same outfit with basically the same detailing, the main difference being no ghost abs, no ghost pecs, no ghost cleavage. Instead, we've taken the harness and the poncho or cape from canon human Thresh and punched them up a bit to make them match the fancier vibe of the uniform as a whole. This Thresh is not an attractive sexy boy, but he is still designed to be appealing, just in a different way. We'll get back to that. First though, the face. We based this face on the canonical human Thresh, so rounder and a little bit more square than the pretty boy face he got, older and a little bit more ordinary. This is someone who could probably be quite handsome if they put their mind to it with a bit of grooming and skincare, but look at that expression. Look how the face is framed. This is not flirty or seductive, and it's certainly not friendly. This is a Hannibal Lecter look. This is someone obsessively staring at you and imagining all the horrible things he's going to do to you, and not seeing you as a person even a little bit. Galiano, the artist, had the brilliant idea of using the fact that light spills up from his collar to light his face from below, like you would do with a flashlight when you tell creepy stories around the campfire. And the effect is just absolute chef's kiss. This Thresh is not a ghost, but he is still creepy. You do not want to catch his attention. Getting hooked by him is not an, "Oh, tee-hee, daddy, please don't hurt me," kind of kinky monster moment. It's horror, which leads us to the crown again. It's the same one that we put on the monstrous skin, and it's there for a couple of reasons. First of all, because it calls back to human Thresh and his headpiece, and if Unbound Thresh looks more human the more power he gets, putting a crown on him works to tell the story of how he likes to control and manipulate people. But lore theory time. Viego is the ruined king, but just as he was not interested in being king of Camavor, he's not actually interested in being the king of the Shadow Isles. He's not interested in ruling. He wants his queen, he wants Isolde back. That is his obsession and entitlement. That's his ghost mission. He's spreading the ruination mostly as a means to search for pieces of Isolde's soul to revive her, but on the Shadow Isles, as in Camavor, Viego pays no attention to his kingdom. Thresh, on the other hand, who loves having power over others as a means to inflict pain, he does pay attention. Riot have said that Unbound Thresh is teasing a lore development for Thresh, so my assumption is that when Viego is all done and defeated, Thresh will be the one to take over. He will take over as Lord of the Shadow Isles, or the new ruined king, or whatever, and that's where his story is gonna go. And that makes sense to me. Like, that is the kind of thing that Thresh would do. It is in character for him, because that kind of power gives him more opportunities to create suffering. It gives him more opportunities to hurt people, which is what he wants. So, we gave him a crown. Slightly similar to Viego's, but based on Thresh's past instead of Viego's Camavoran crown. And that comes into play with human Thresh, because that's also the reason we gave him the staff. It's first of all a callback to his canon human form, where he has a lantern staff, but it's also regal. A scepter is a symbol of kingly authority, a symbol of command, and since Unbound Thresh is already decking himself out in gold colors and Blessed Isles aesthetics, I think it fits him that he should also have his staff back. Now, the idea here is that he can detach his lantern from the staff, so that in-game he would have his usual floating lantern, and the staff would be something that he pulls out for a recall and attaches the lantern to it and holds it up in like an ominous evil king pose. I wouldn't propose him throwing that entire staff around just to use as W, My sense is that the reason they made Unbound Thresh look so much fancier than his old torn rags is because they're setting him up to become the main villain of the Shadow Isles, and so he needed a more royal-looking outfit to go with it. He needed the aesthetics of power, and I wanted to play into that same concept because that sounds like a good idea to me. Which is his appeal, too, by the way. We've taken away the sex appeal, which just doesn't suit his character, and we've replaced it instead with the appeal of power. Fancy outfit, staff, crown, power, and prestige. The power to do whatever you want, to exact whatever revenge you might want. Not the power to be seductive or the power of beauty. We have Viego or Evelyn for that. But the power of outsmarting and manipulating everyone around you and taking your rightful place in control of everything, able to hurt anyone who has ever wronged you. That's not an especially healthy or positive power fantasy, of course, but he's a villain. Their power fantasies aren't supposed to be nice. So, to sum up this video that got way longer than it was ever actually supposed to, my argument is that the Unbound Thresh skin that Riot produced came from censorship in local markets on one hand, and censorship from Riot's corporate priorities on the other. It ignores Thresh's lore and themes, it ignores what makes him interesting as a character, in favor of just flattening all of his character design into broad appeal for engagement. And as a result, the skin sucks as a canonical expression of the character's lore. Our first proposal keeps Thresh as a monster, while still expressing the core idea of Unbound Thresh. When you tell me Thresh at maximum power, this is what I would come up with in response. Thresh is a monster, he likes being a monster, and when he's at full power, then he should be fully monstrous. But there are censorship laws. Wild Rift needs to be available to everyone, and so the monster has to be scaled back. Our monster design is probably not feasible in the real world. Okay. Then, here's a human version of Thresh that respects his canonical appearance, that doesn't default to just making him a sexy man because broad appeal, that still makes him scary and monstrous without being supernatural, and which, if the idea is that Thresh is going to be the new king of the Shadow Isles, can fit into the role of a ruined king. Are these designs perfect? No, of course not. Nothing is perfect, but my argument is that they are, on the terms that I have defined in this video, better expressions of Thresh's character than what Riot decided to try and sell to us. You can let me know in the comments if you agree. Thank you to Laura Galiano for taking on this commission. Her skill as a character artist and her feedback and dialogue about my ideas helped make these alternative designs much better than I could have made them on my own. You can find her at artstation.com/swoobats and on Instagram at instagram.com/swoorats. She's occasionally open for commissions, and I can fully recommend her work. Speaking of feedback, dialogue, and criticism, thank you to the sponsor of this video, Skillshare, whose sponsorship helps me pay the rent this month. Skillshare is a learning platform, so it has no ads, and if you would like to improve or learn some new skills of your own, the first 1,000 of my subscribers who click the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare Premium membership so you can explore your own creativity. If you'd like to learn something about art criticism and how to form your own constructive critiques, Serena Rotaro has produced a series called Learn to Form Your Own Opinion About Art the Way Art Critics Do, where she goes through some of the principles and history of art criticism, how to understand art, how to form coherent ideas about it, and how to express them in critical ways. Or you could take MJ Trung's course on how to critique design. It's focused on material design, objects, and products, but many of the same principles apply to art in general. Thank you again to Skillshare for supporting this channel. Oh boy. This was not originally supposed to be an episode of Building a Better, actually. Originally, I just planned to commission the art and do like maybe a 10-minute video talking about it, but then, well, you know, because of the way that I am as a person, things just kind of spiraled a little bit out of my control. Like, Laura's art was just so good, and the Ruination event keeps kind of missing the mark, and I just ended up having so many things to say, and I went way too much in depth, and I was like, oh, well, I guess this is a Building a Better episode now, actually. Applecork and I actually have another Building a Better episode in the works already. Like, we're working on it. I just had to go and be extra, I guess. Anyway, if you enjoyed me being extra, then once again, please go follow Laura Galiano and her work, links in the description, because it is good. And also, maybe hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons while you're down there and, you know, do engagement with the video. Yeah, as much as I complain about Riot designing for engagement, I am trapped in exactly the same kind of system, and I need your clicks. This video is sponsored, so I'll keep self-promotion to a minimum. I have a Let's Play channel where I play games. I have a Shorts channel where I make really short videos that don't take this long to get through. Subscribe to those if you want, but other than that, thank you again for watching. Wear a mask and wash your hands. Yes, even still. Take whatever vaccines are necessary to end this goddamn pandemic, and try to act with solidarity towards those who are worse off than yourself.